Hey, welcome to Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. Today I have with me the man, the myth, the legend, Wayne Carter, my pops. How are you, pops?
Doing good, doing good.
Man, it is always an honor and a pleasure to see you. I'm really grateful for this technology to be able to do this and have this space when we're not physically present. And I also want to say I really appreciate you coming out and hanging out with us on Thursday with the boys. I just really value your time, sir.
Well, it was all fun for me.
All right. All right, well, let's kind of get back in this conversation, kind of centering around your life, but really maybe dealing with a whole lot more things than that. And I want to apologize to you a little bit because I know that we get to kind of rolling through your life chronologically, and then I kind of bring us back. And it's because I do look at these things and it's like, well, hey, I've got another little question about this, or we kind of missed out on that. And there's kind of a conversation that we have missed out on, and really something that you talked about last time triggered it for me, and that was when you talked about going to Laverne or going to Smyrna High School and kind of experiencing social hierarchy or that social hierarchy in life firsthand. And I just really want to kind of think about the time that you lived in was really a tumultuous time when we think about that theme of social hierarchy and political power and all those things. I mean, you grew up during the civil rights movement. I mean, you were really young for most of that. I mean, think about the Nashville lunch counter sit-ins was in 1960. You know, that was kind of in February through May of 1960. Um, and then JFK was killed in 1963. Um, and then the civil rights being signed, by Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964. What do you remember about those things kind of on a national scale? And what do you remember about that atmosphere in the local environment? Did you experience kind of segregation in an extent that you remember? Do you remember when segregation was ended? I guess not long after the Civil Rights Act was signed, right? What do you recall about that?
Well, I'll go back to the JFK assassination. That's one of those days, probably the most significant day in a person's life that you just remember. Uh, I would have been fourth grade maybe, but I remember we were at Laverne School and the classrooms were overcrowded, and so they had us make another, I guess, fourth grade class. And
So, just for me keeping up with the story that we've already kind of established, this is after the school had burned down. Are y'all at the new school
correct,
on the other side of what Nashville
Highway
Highway or whatever?
41.
Highway
Yeah,
41, right? Okay, I'm with you. Continue.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. But it was already overcrowded.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Yeah, but so they had the reason I remember is our classroom. They had to put us on the stage for the classroom because there was just no more rooms. And uh, I recall the teacher getting called to the office, uh, and and I guess we didn't have teachers' aides at that point. I think what would have normally happened is she would have said, "Okay, so and so student, you take names of anybody that talks while I'm gone," and then because we generally behave. But when
Yeah,
she
right.
came back, I'll never forget. She came back just crying and just had us all put our heads down on the desk and told us that President Kennedy had been shot. Now we didn't know he was dead at that point; just know he was shot. And and really, that was I don't remember anything else about that day except when I got home uh, and I guess on the 6 o'clock news, uh, hearing that report and watching Dad and Mom's reaction to that. That they were Kennedy supporters. Uh, uh, we were Democrats and union people and supported labor and that kind of stuff. And it was a major deal, but it was one of those things that just embedded in my mind of the teacher's reaction coming back, and again she was just in tears, and yeah, that was a big deal.
What was Grandma and Granddad's reaction like when they found out he did in fact die? I mean, kind of regardless of if they were supporters, but even more so that they were when your leader, your president, is killed in that way. That's kind of a big deal. Um, what was their reaction?
My 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 memory is that was trying to figure out a way of describing that. But I would say shock, disbelief, you know, because it was Walter Cronkite, so we believed it. But it was just you know, how could this happen, to our in our country? Anyway.
Hmm. Hmm. So, and you said that Granddad and Grandma traditionally voted Democrat because of the ties to the labor unions. Do you have any really memory of any of that contextually? Was that a big deal for Granddad and Grandma? Is that something that they talked about maybe over supper or anything like that? What do you remember about that around the house?
Yeah, I remember there was this discussion or talk about it, not directed at me, but just to each other. I'd overhear it. Uh, but then Dad was a trustee in the Carpenters Local Union out of Nashville, and so he had a meetings. I don't know if they were weekly or monthly, but he'd go to a meeting, and occasionally I'd go with him, and to hear those guys discuss that politics, not the Kennedy thing per se, but just politics was, and that was a pretty good sized group of folks, and of course back in those days, the carpenters had a union, the electricians had a union, the pipe fitters had a union, the laborers had a union, and Nashville was booming as far as construction. So that was a good sized part of the population, and labor
Yeah.
population.
Well, it also seems that it was also booming just in general. If the way you described Laverne School and having a new school built and then already being too small, um, you remember any details or maybe not specific details, but maybe some feelings or some impacts that those meetings might have had on you?
Uh, I guess the camaraderie that those guys had. Yeah, I didn't think about it at the time, but looking back at it later on, that those guys were sticking together uh, for something, and it was. I guess it was self-preservation in a bit, because of the way that group stuck together. But they were friends too. I remember. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but when Laverne First Baptist Church built a new church. Did I tell you this story?
I don't know, and I don't know which new church. I remember them building a new sanctuary that they kind of still have now, or
Now this was before at the time, Laverne First Baptist Church was up on a hill right across from where Mom and Dad lived, up on a
Yeah, we
hill.
talked about this. I do remember this.
And
Go ahead.
about all those labor people, the different guys came in and built that church for labor free. That was a that impressed me.
Yeah, I don't know if you mentioned that part of it. That is very interesting. What did you think about Granddad being a part of those meetings like that and kind of had the position that he was holding in that organization? Did you have any ideas about that at the time? Is that something that may have stayed with you?
Well, at the time, I don't know that it struck me as important as it did later on. When I got to be 15, 16, 17 years old, it became fairly obvious that Dad was thought of as a person of integrity. And if he wasn't an officer in the union, but he was a trustee of the union. And you know the difference, and I won't go into that. But that's something that, if there were decisions that made that for like financial and those kind of things, investments and those, he was part of that group of guys that made those decisions. And then when I started working with him to see how he was very much uh, respected on the job. So yeah, I think in the long run it did.
Did at the time it ever did you ever feel it took away from maybe your time with your dad and stuff like that, or time away from, or why are we driving to Nashville, or do
No,
you
it
feel
was.
like you saw the impact in your community from those things?
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't get to go all the time. It was just occasionally that I would go with him. It was just a big treat to go, and
Right, yeah.
you know, and after the meeting, they'd all go down to the Crystals and get a cup of coffee. You know,
That's cool. I don't know that I've ever heard that before. That's interesting. um well, kind of getting back to the idea, around Kennedy's assassination. And I think for me, I compare that to the attack on New York of the Twin Towers. And I remember being at Lebanon High School in criminal justice class, and kind of that being on the news, and everybody kind of being worried about if there was another attack and all those kind of things. And I think that might be the closest thing that might be to that.
I
I
agree. I
also,
think that would have been another one for me. Absolutely. Yeah.
um, so back to this idea of the civil rights movement. Did you have any kind of awareness of that? What did you notice as far as the racial demographics of your community early on? And we think about, right there in 1964, around then, segregation ended. Um, what's your perception of that?
Well, I remember the first black student that came to class, Clarence Webb, and was turned out to be one of my best friends. Uh, and I don't think, at least for me, and I can't speak for every other kid, it was not a thing that was a bad thing. It was a good thing. Uh, we enjoyed it, and because that's when we started playing basketball together, probably fifth, sixth grade, and we were just friends. And his grandmother and were friends of mom and dad. I mean, we knew the family, and it was just, in my mind, it was a very positive thing.
So you say you knew the family. Did Clarence live close to you? Did you already have some relationship? What were those maybe racial or ethnic demographics of Laverne at the time, as best you can figure? I mean, obviously you're not really paying attention to those things as a kid, but how do you kind of recall the development of that maybe?
Well, now we did not really have a relationship other than passing. before that, but I guess as a result of that, we became really good friends. So that, like I said, I think that was a good thing. But in Laverne, what was called Old Laverne at the time, and there was a, I don't know if you remember, there was a store called Arnold's Store. If you left mom and dad's house on Old 41 and headed west toward Nashville, you remember there was an underpass that went underneath the railroad track? Well,
Sure.
just on the east side of that, mom and dad's side of that, that's Old Laverne.
Okay.
There was a store there. Post office had been there at one point.
Now, is
Uh,
that where the barber shop was?
now the barbershop was back
A
toward
little
mom and
bit
dad.
before that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But and and if you can picture that road going west before you get to the underpass, if you would go south or to the left, that would have been back in that area would have been the predominantly black community, and
Okay.
that's where Clarence raised up and we just never really our social life pretty much was school and church. And so if they didn't weren't going to school or church with us, I didn't really know them. And
Yeah.
so when they started going to schools, when we became friends.
Do you remember any other maybe racial demographics or even ethnic demographics prevalent?
Not really. Yeah. Because when it got a little bit older, when I went to Smyrna High School, uh, desegregation had been around for a couple of years, and you had a bigger population, and so yeah, there was a bigger percentage of African Americans in Smyrna than we would have had at Laverne, and the ones I played ball with were my friends. I mean, we were all probably best friends.
Yeah.
Mother, you probably heard the story where she would, take a bunch of guys home after football practice or basketball practice, give them a ride home. There was as many African American kids in there. There was maybe more. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, and so even as far as the white folks, would that predominantly Protestant denominations? Do you remember any Roman Catholic or any other anything other than Protestant?
now, pretty much around us were, of course, we were Southern Baptist. Uh, there was a Methodist church and a Church of Christ, and there was a black church, and I'm trying to remember. They were like Episcopal, Methodist, Baptist, or they had two or three different names
Maybe
to begin with.
AME would have been an
Yeah,
AME church?
that might have been. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you remember any kind of impact that you noticed on you, or did you notice any conversations at the dinner table, maybe not to you, but between grandma and granddad during that time of the between JFK and the Civil Rights Act being passed, and then it's in later on in 1968 when Dr. King and RFK Senior, I guess, is assassinated. Um,
Yeah, 68, see, I'd have probably been seventh or eighth grade. And I remember that. Uh, my memory was almost angry about it, the fact that happened. And probably more the Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's, because they were supporters of John Kennedy, and now they were angry, and I think that was probably when I became a little more attuned politically. I probably up until that point I was just a kid, and I'm still a kid, but I began aware of it. And then when a lot of the stuff about what was going on in Vietnam came out, I think it set into to me and probably a lot of people in my age group a little bit of distrust for the government.
That's interesting. Do you think maybe looking back now that that's not just something that you maybe experienced individually, but maybe there was a collective experience in that as well?
Yeah, I mean, you look back, and I didn't realize it was collective at the time, but looking back at it years later, yeah, I mean, you can see through the some of the music, the Bob Dylan stuff, and some of those type of things that I don't think I was smart enough to realize tie it together. There was I was talking about this with somebody this morning. Uh, there was a Mad magazine that was out during the time, and I was a fan of Mad magazine because I thought it was funny. Go back and look at it now; a lot of political satire.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Well, hey, I hate to ever end our conversation, but that seems like a pretty good breaking point, especially how you say that, maybe that 1968 event with Bobby Kennedy and maybe Dr. King beforehand, really that violence really impacting you in a way that almost made a hinging point in your life as far as being aware of those political situations and atmospheres.
Yeah, and of course, that same time frame, the 66, 67 was when brother went and went in the military, got drafted in the military. All that's kind of happening at the same
At the
time.
same time. Awesome. Yeah, and when we get together, I kind of want to talk more about your experience in high school and kind of really your basketball experience and kind of how that transferred into your experience at MTSU.
Sure.
All right. Well, hey, Pops, I appreciate it again. This has been Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. Peace and love.